I remember getting my first Walkman in 1984. That was the year I turned 11, and I was living in Sweden at the time. But it wasn't a proper Sony brand Walkman, it was one of those cheap no-name brands. In Sweden, these portable cassette players were known as freestyles. So my tech nomination for 1979 is the original model Sony Walkman. With this revolutionary machine, Sony single-handedly changed the way that all generations in the future would listen and consume to music via a portable device with headphones. In July 1979, Sony released its first portable cassette player, the TPS-L2, in Japan. This was the age that the personal stereo was born. It was also the year that Pink Floyd released its seminal album, The Wall. Now, I was too young to own this first original model, but when it first came out, it wasn't even called a Walkman. In the US, it was called the Soundabout, while in the UK, it was launched as the Stowaway, and in Sweden, Sony called it the Freestyle, which is why that name stuck in Sweden. And this is why the early models didn't have the name Walkman at the bottom. Instead, it just said stereo, but no Walkman brand at the bottom. Some even featured a sticker with the Walking Feet Walkman logo from the early days on the cover. But nevertheless, it was this blue TPS-L2 Walkman that started a revolution in the way that we all listen to music. That's why it's such an iconic device. Now, there had been portable cassette players earlier, but the ironic thing is that all of these were designed specifically with recording in mind. It would have a little speaker for playback, but nothing that was designed for listening to music. It was simply used for recording voice and interviews with a playback function, and then that cassette could be taken out and put into a stereo or other device for better sound. So until this point, no similar device had components built specifically for playing. So that's what made this so radically new. This was specifically designed for playing and listening to music. It was a new concept because when it came to music, every other device, whether it's a record player or a large hi-fi system, all of these were designed for shared music experience, not as personal stereos. That is why this device had 2 headphone sockets, 2 separate volume sliders, and even this funny button that when pressed activated the microphone that one person could talk to the other person. Talk about stupid. Why? Who would need that? Just take off your headphones. The thing that most people don't realize about this portable cassette player is that this was very much an experiment at the time. Sony had not invested a lot of money. It was really a device that was cobbled together from various other devices that Sony made. They took out the speakers, added in 2 headphone sets, and made the playing components a bit better. But really, there was no certainty that this product would even sell, that consumers would even get what it was meant to be. So this is why it's kind of rather boxy, cobbled together. It's nothing really elegant about this design. It really is just an experimental machine, and Sony decided to take a gamble. But the really innovative thing about this Walkman actually was the headphones. Now, headphones at the time were either designed to be bulky for listening to large stereos, or there were other types of headphones that connected to telephones and things like that. But the idea of making lightweight portable headphones is actually what, when coupled with this device, changed the game. People could literally take it anywhere and listen to music of their choice when they wanted, where they wanted. And that was the thing that had never existed before. The proof of this is the fact that by 1980, these were selling like hotcakes, and just a year later, in 1981, Sony released its second ever Walkman, and it was almost half the size, much more ergonomic, had 1 headphone jack, and really set the standard design for the next 20 years in what personal stereo systems would look like. And by the time I got my own low-budget freestyle cassette player in 1984, having a Walkman or anything of the type was the absolute bee's knees. As a young Generation Xer, the portable cassette player would become an integral part of my life. Like today's mobile devices, from the age of 11 onwards, I was never without one. So my tech nomination for 1979 is the Sony Walkman TPS-L2, the device that started it all, and a music revolution for the decades to come.